Michael Bennett couldn't believe their luck when he found the house in Oak Ridge Estates, a beautiful colonial with a spacious backyard, perfect for his wife Sarah's gardening dreams, and their 10-year-old son Ethan's soccer practice. The real estate agent had casually mentioned the HOA, describing it as thorough but fair. Michael would soon discover just how generous that assessment had been. On moving day, while unloading the medical equipment Ethan needed for his severe asthma, a shadow fell across the driveway. There stood Patricia Wilkins, clipboard in hand and pearls gleaming in the sunlight, introducing herself as the HOA president rather than your neighbor. Your moving truck is parked 6 inches beyond the designated loading zone, she stated without a hello, handing Michael a yellow slip of paper. First violation notice. I'm waiving the fine since you're new, but please familiarize yourself with the community guidelines. She gestured to a 3-inch thick binder she'd brought with her. As she walked away, their next-door neighbor Tom leaned over the fence. Welcome to the Patricia Show, he whispered. She's got cameras, actual cameras, pointed at the community mailboxes to catch people who let their dogs pee on the decorative shrubs. That night, as Michael organized Ethan's breathing equipment in their converted garage medical space, Sarah discovered 3 more violation notices tucked into their mailbox for wind chimes that exceeded the approved ambient noise levels, a welcome mat with non-conforming iconography, and garbage bins placed at the curb before the sanctioned hour of 6 p.m. Maybe it's just first-week hazing, Sarah suggested hopefully. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Patricia's watching your garage light. Curfew for exterior lighting is 10 p.m. Tick-tock. The next morning, Michael decided to address these issues directly. He found Patricia power washing her already spotless driveway, dressed in crisp khakis and a polo shirt embroidered with Oak Ridge Estates HOA, at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Good morning, Patricia. I wanted to discuss these notices, Michael began, forcing a friendly tone. Patricia turned off the power washer and examined him over designer sunglasses. Violations, she corrected, not notices. Proper terminology is important for community standards. Michael explained about Ethan's medical equipment and their need for the garage conversion. We have all the proper permits from the city. I'd be happy to show you. City permits are irrelevant to HOA bylaws, Patricia interrupted, handing him another yellow slip. Your garbage can lid is ajar by approximately 4 inches. Section 12.37 clearly states that all refuse containers must be fully secured at all times. Michael glanced at his trash can across the street. I just took it out 5 minutes ago. Then you have 4 minutes to correct the violation before it's logged, Patricia replied, checking her watch. Also, you're currently in violation of Noise Ordinance 5.2 by having this conversation outdoors before 9 a.m. on a weekend. As Michael walked back home, bewildered, he noticed how pristine the neighborhood appeared, not a basketball hoop or children's toy in sight. Every lawn measured precisely the same height. Window blinds all aligned to identical levels. It was like living in a life-sized architectural model. Inside, he found Ethan helping Sarah unpack kitchen boxes. Dad, can I set up my telescope on the back deck tonight? Tom says you can see Jupiter really well from this neighborhood. Michael hesitated, suddenly unsure. Let me check if there are any rules about that. Sarah shot him a concerned look over Ethan's head. Later that day, a knock at the door revealed a timid woman clutching a covered dish. I'm Rebecca from 3 doors down. I brought lasagna. She lowered her voice. My advice? Take down your son's drawing from the front window. Patricia cited the Johnsons last year when their daughter put up a rainbow picture, unauthorized window displays, and register your son's medical condition with the board immediately or she'll use it against you. Use his asthma against us. How? You've blocked a designated emergency access point, she stated, pointing to their driveway as if it were a critical hospital landing pad rather than their own property. My son nearly died today, Michael said, voice shaking with exhaustion and rage. Patricia sniffed. Medical emergencies don't exempt you from community guidelines. What if emergency vehicles needed access? You mean like the access you're blocking right now with that tow truck? Sarah snapped, still cradling a sleeping Ethan. Patricia's eyes narrowed. The fine is $250, plus $175 for after-hours enforcement. The towing fee is separate. She handed Michael a violation notice and turned to leave. The irony, Michael called after her, is that you're literally blocking emergency access to our home right now, with my medically fragile son inside, all in the name of keeping emergency access clear. Patricia paused, then continued walking. Rules are rules, Mr. Bennett. Perhaps next time you'll plan your emergency better. Michael didn't sleep that night. Instead, he built a war room at his dining table, medical records, HOA bylaws, violation notices, and his laptop. By dawn, he had 3 crucial pieces of information. Patricia had been selectively enforcing rules for years. The HOA was violating ADA regulations by denying reasonable accommodations, and Patricia's husband owned the only towing company authorized to service Oak Ridge Estates. He found a lawyer specializing in HOA disputes, who listened to his story and simply said, "I've been waiting for someone to take her on." Meanwhile, Michael created an encrypted messaging group for neighbors called Life After Patricia. Within 24 hours, 47 households had joined, sharing hundreds of violation photos, selective enforcement examples, and personal stories. Mrs. Abernathy revealed that Patricia had threatened to place a lien on her house over the wheelchair ramp. The Dyers family discovered they'd been charged triple the standard fine rate with no explanation. Most damning was Tom's security camera footage showing Patricia measuring lawn heights at 3 a.m. with a flashlight, placing garden gnomes on porches herself, and once even repositioning someone's trash can to be 6 inches beyond the property line. At the emergency HOA meeting Michael demanded, attendance was unprecedented. Patricia arrived with her usual clipboard, but faltered when she saw the crowd. Michael's lawyer presented that evidence methodically. When he showed the hospital records from Ethan's emergency alongside photos of Patricia blocking their driveway with a tow truck, audible gasps filled the room. Federal housing law explicitly prohibits discrimination based on disability, which includes denying reasonable accommodations, the lawyer explained. Each violation carries penalties up to $150,000, plus punitive damages. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Patricia attempted to adjourn the meeting, but for once, no one backed down. "I move to remove Patricia Wilkins as HOA president for gross misconduct," said Mrs. Abernathy, rising shakily with her walker, "and to audit all HOA finances immediately." The vote was unanimous. Even Patricia's usual allies abandoned her. The financial audit revealed that Patricia's husband's towing company had received over $180,000 in the past year alone from HOA-mandated tows. Further investigation uncovered selective enforcement patterns targeting specific homeowners who had opposed Patricia's initiatives. By summer's end, Oak Ridge Estates had transformed. The new board, led by Mrs. Abernathy and Michael, rewrote the bylaws to prioritize community well-being over cosmetic uniformity. They created a medical exemption process and established a neighborhood emergency response team. When Patricia and her husband put their house on the market, no one was surprised. On their moving day, something remarkable happened. Neighbors came out to help them load their truck, not out of forgiveness, but as a united demonstration that Oak Ridge Estates residents now understood the difference between rules and compassion. The day they drove away, Michael installed a small bench at the entrance to their cul-de-sac with a plaque reading, "In celebration of neighbors who became family." As for Ethan, he thrived in the new environment. 6 months later, when he had another asthma attack, 5 neighbors appeared at their door within minutes, one with a nebulizer, another clearing the driveway for ambulance access, and Mrs. Abernathy arriving with her medical power of attorney experience to help with hospital paperwork. Michael often reflected on how close they'd come to leaving Oak Ridge Estates. Sometimes, he told Sarah as they watched Ethan playing soccer with neighborhood kids, "The worst people bring out the best in a community." Across the street, Tom was installing a wheelchair ramp for Mrs. Abernathy, without a single form to fill out. By month 3, The Bennetts had received 26 violation notices. Patricia seemed to materialize out of thin air whenever they committed the slightest infraction. She appeared at their doorstep during dinner parties to inform them that guest parking passes must be displayed on the passenger side dashboard, not the driver's side. She measured the height of Sarah's rose bushes with a tape measure while they ate breakfast. The real trouble began when Michael installed an air purification system that required an exterior vent. Despite having medical documentation and contractor permits, Patricia claimed it violated the aesthetic continuity clause of the bylaws. "My son needs this to breathe," Michael explained, showing her Ethan's medical records. Patricia glanced at the papers. The bylaws don't recognize medical necessity as grounds for exterior modifications. You'll need to apply for a variance, which requires signatures from all homeowners within visual distance, plus approval from the architectural committee, which, she smiled thinly, I chair. At the next HOA meeting, Michael discovered he wasn't alone. Mrs. Abernathy, an 82-year-old widow, tearfully described being fined for installing a temporary wheelchair ramp after her hip surgery. The Diaz family had been penalized for having a college graduation banner up for 26 hours instead of the permitted 24. When Michael raised his concerns about selective enforcement, Patricia cut the microphone. "We're out of time for open comments," she announced, though the meeting had barely started. Next agenda item: increasing patrol frequency for lawn ornament violations. Walking home, Michael was approached by 5 different neighbors, each sharing their own Patricia horror stories in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders as if she might materialize from behind a tree. "She's got the board wrapped around her finger," explained Tom. "Most of us have given up." But Michael, watching Ethan use his inhaler on the front steps, knew he couldn't afford to surrender. The crisis erupted on a sweltering Thursday afternoon. Michael was on a conference call when Sarah's name flashed on his phone. He answered to hear Ethan wheezing in the background, a sound that turned his blood cold. "His lips are turning blue." Sarah's voice trembled. "The emergency inhaler isn't working." Michael broke every speed limit racing home. He found Sarah in the driveway, Ethan limp in her arms. She'd pulled their SUV out, engine running, ready to go. "The ambulance is at least 15 minutes away," she said. "We need to go now." As Michael helped load Ethan into the car, he spotted Patricia marching toward them, walkie-talkie in hand. He ignored her, focused only on his son's labored breathing. At the hospital, doctors rushed Ethan into emergency care. "Another 5 minutes," the doctor later told them gravely, "and we might be having a very different conversation." It was past midnight when they returned home, emotionally drained but grateful. Ethan was stabilized and sleeping in the backseat. Michael turned onto their street and stopped abruptly. A large yellow boot locked their second car's wheel, the one Sarah had left partially blocking their own driveway in her panic. Behind it sat a tow truck, hazard lights blinking. And there stood Patricia in a monogrammed bathrobe and slippers, supervising.